This is Coder Radio, Episode 6, July 16th, 2012. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and software development, something like that, of business technologies, something to that matter. My name is Chris, and joining me every single week is Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Good morning, Chris. Are you a little confused today?
I haven't had my morning coffee yet.
I see.
No, you know what it is exactly that, is I'm still waking up, but I am excited to be here because we've got a really good show, 20,000 Leagues under Java. What's that about?
Well, we've gotten a lot of requests to talk about lower level languages.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to do it. Now, we're going to do lower level in terms of C and C++ and things of that level, maybe Objective-C, maybe not. I will totally admit that the lowest level is binary, but my binary foo is non-existent.
Oh.
Just like my assembly foo is non-existent.
I'll be honest, it doesn't sound like it would make compelling podcasting either.
No, I mean, I could sit here for an hour and go 0.0000001, but I'm not sure it would really be entertaining. So, yeah, we're gonna pretty much cap it at C.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. Plus, we've also got some feedback, which we're going to get to because everybody's been sending in some good stuff. A audience member submitted war story, which is going to be great. And then at the end, a little update on our open source Jupiter Broadcasting app project. It's going to be a good show.
Indeed. Yep.
Should we start with the feedback?
Let's do it.
All right, what's our first one?
Right off the bat, Emmett wrote in. So Emmett appears to be a IT sysadmin. He wants to know if there's a development or scripting solution to repave multiple boxes with custom software. So there is. It depends on your platform, but there's a much easier solution that's called just using images. Now, Chris, I'm sure you're familiar with just using hard drive images.
Yeah, of course.
Emmett wrote in his letter that his employer will not allow him to do that.
Why, they don't want him to use machine images?
Yeah. Which is odd because I hate to tell you, Emmett, but for what you're asking, that's kind of the standard.
Yeah, he didn't say why, though.
He didn't say why. He just said they said no.
Okay, well, that sounds crazy, but okay, we'll go with it.
Right. I mean, even Mac, Windows, Linux, pretty much everybody uses images at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, dude, that's actually how Windows 7 and Windows 8 installs. They actually decompress from an image on the DVD.
Right. So now, theoretically, and I can't say this will work because I've never done it, if he's on a Linux system, which it sounds like he's not, but help him out anyway.
Huh.
He could write a script that maybe ties into Aptitude, it's called apt-get now, Yum or Pacman, something like that, to actually install packages in order. That's a little sloppy.
So he's really looking for a good way to automate this, is what his real question is here.
The problem is there already is a good way to automate it, and his boss said no.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason people don't write, Python scripts to pave a new Ubuntu or a new Fedora box, and that's
from a totally like IT system standpoint, there are things like Windows answer files that you can when you boot from the Windows 7 DVD to install it, you can supply it with a flag to actually refer to an INI file for instructions on what to set up and how to set things. So that's one way to do some level of automation. You could also, look at tools like Mondo Rescue. Mondo Rescue doesn't do imaging per se as much as it does file level copying and then file level restore. And that's technically not an image-based solution.
Yeah, I mean it sounds like that might be on the line for his boss, though.
Yeah,
and that's pretty close.
Gosh.
I mean, somebody in the chat's mentioning a Kickstart script. Yeah, that would probably work.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how well that works on
and
Windows.
For higher level type machine deployments like servers or Linux workstations, you'd have to look into this for Windows. I'm not familiar with it, but there is some software called Puppet, which is designed to be sort of configuration management and deployment and change control for servers, and you might be able to take that and alter it for workstations too. I don't know. It's called Puppet. It's open source.
Okay, I mean that's something to look into. But honestly, Chris, my opinion here would be I would try and lay out the efficiency benefits of using imaging in this case, especially on
I
Windows.
agree. I agree with you, Michael. I think that'd be a much better use of resources. To be honest, is for him to just to build a business case for it and maybe cite some easy to find literature online about how imaging works. Because
Yeah, because he says he's deploying for a whole business. So this isn't like a family of four situation here.
yeah,
This
for like a
is.
family of four, Mondo Rescue would probably be more appropriate.
But Emmett, sorry we couldn't be more helpful. Hopefully, Mondo Rescue or
Answer files or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird on Windows though. That's the problem.
Look into sysprep, dude, and good luck.
Yeah, I might want to have a chat with your boss if you're in good with them.
Yeah.
All right, so Stefan, I hope
Mhm.
I said that correctly. He's interested in learning more or hearing more about desktop development. Additionally, he's working on a panel using zlib and Python. Now, this brings up a good point. If you're working on something and want me to mention it, a brief description would be great, and the project name was also helpful.
Yeah. Then we could pull it up here and we could look at it while we're talking about it.
Yep. So feel free, Stefan, if you want to email that this week, we can include it next week. That's fine. I'll also know another Python fan in the community. There's a lot of you.
Yeah, there are.
So, yeah, in his letter, Chris, he goes on to say we talk a lot about web apps and mobile apps, which is true.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
So I would venture that this is episode 6.
Mhm.
So there's definitely a ways more to go.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And additionally, I'm actually working on a desktop app and have one submitted, and the Ubuntu version coming very soon, that I promise I will be pushing very, very hard. So,
There you go.
and I'm going to talk about my experience with it, particularly on the Ubuntu side, because I think that would be more
Awesome.
interesting.
Awesome. That'll be great.
Next email, I guess I mentioned recursion last week. Someone named Daniel wrote in asking me to talk about it more.
Okay.
Will do. We're probably going to do an episode on functional programming, and recursion's a big part of that.
Oh.
All right. And then the last thing. Now, this last one-liner, Chris, was about 30 emails.
And you managed to summarize it down into one sentence?
One line.
Wow, dude. Good job.
The line is, we had some passionate reactions to the piracy issue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, I apologize if I didn't email you back directly. I emailed about the first 10, but it got to be a lot on the same thing. Interestingly enough, I think I swayed a few people to my way of thinking, which awesome. But it seems to be a very hot. Yeah, a few people were like, "Oh, well, if there's a server running and it's costing you money, then yeah, they're stealing."
That's really what it came down to, I think, in our conversation was, see, what people really, I think, if I could just boil down from some of the commentary that I saw, was a lot of the people were saying, because I'm not actually taking a physical good of yours and you're now leaving you without it, I'm not actually stealing, I'm copying. But what your case was that actually still costs you, especially now that we go to this integrated solution where you have local apps that talk to cloud services, because as the developer, you have to finance those cloud services, and the more users you have, the more it costs you. And so if someone is copying your application, while yes, they're not taking that physical good, they're still using your physical services that you pay for and thus stealing.
Yeah, and there were people who completely disagreed and said, well, you should protect against that. And there were others who were, in fact, more aggressive than I am. So all that tells me, Chris, is that this is a hot button issue and that there's no clear solution in sight.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like my position was somewhat middle of the road, but I got emails from both extremes.
Yeah, I saw both comments both ways. But Michael, it's a conversation that is just so far from being over, because the every app is going to eventually have some sort of cloud integration, right? Every desktop application even as well. It's not just a mobile space thing. It's definitely not just a mobile space thing.
Yeah, most, even actually the desktop app that I'm releasing shortly relies heavily on a backend. It's not my backend, but it's there. So this issue is going to keep coming up. And not to belabor the point, the thing I don't want to see happen is developers feel compelled to implement their own crazy DRM schemes.
Oh yeah, right. Because the topic came up again because Google's announced DRM for the marketplace at Google
Right.
I/O. They announced that.
That's right. So,
Huh.
all right. So that's about it for the feedback. Again, thanks for the feedback. Please feel free to write into coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Yep. And you can also use the contact us link at the top of the website. Those are our main official ways to get feedback into the show. Now, I do sometimes go through and troll the comment sections and see what people are saying, but that's a little harder to manage. So the email and the contact form are the official ways to get something onto the show. Michael, what do you say before we jump to your PSA, which looks like a good one? I can't wait to talk about this because I was semi-involved with this one, at least from the outside. But before we go to that, I'd like to mention that Jupiter Broadcasting does take contributions directly from our audience members. If you go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, one of the things I always talk about is our affiliate links down at the bottom. We have them for Amazon US, UK, Newegg, and ThinkGeek, and Best Buy. And of course, using those helps finance the production of the shows like Coder Radio that don't have a sponsor. Like if you don't hear me do a GoDaddy ad read in this show, then that means the only thing that is financing this show is the listener. And honestly, I could use a little more of that. Things could be a little better financed right now. One of the best ways to do that would be if you wanted to contribute with a monthly subscription. If you're enjoying the new shows and shows like Coder Radio, maybe go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/donate and sign up for a monthly subscription of $2, $5, or $10 a month. Now, I know that's a little hard for everybody, but if you can do it, down there we also have a donor recognition wall where you can say, maybe like a little note, like I see here that Scott has put a note in here with his website, scottlinux.com, and Case put one in down here. And see, people put their links down here, so it helps with your SEO a little bit, plus you give a little thank you message to the team, which is kind of a cool way to go. And we get to kind of also directly observe what people like and what pays the bills, and it's an awesome way to just get some financing right from the audience. So thank you for people who consider doing that or even using the affiliate links. Your support keeps these shows going and helps pay the bills. All right, what do you say we move to PSA?
All right, let's do it. So we've been talking a lot about cloud services. We've talked a lot about Google, and I've mentioned things like Cloud9, Coding, Heroku, .cloud, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, everything online where there's terms of services that are sometimes ambiguous.
It is essential that you take the time to read the terms of service verbatim.
Yeah, we had an audience member learn that this week the hard way, didn't we?
Yes, we did. A audience member who follows me on Google Plus put up a posting of his Google Plus. His Gmail login. The SSH keys.
Yeah, he took like a little screenshot, right, of like all the logged in sessions you can check in Gmail.
Now there were several logins, and he had put a Google Authenticator and changed his password several times from a company who specializes in anti-piracy and, quote, brand protection directly to his Gmail account, according to Google via SSH.
Huh. So this is interesting because he changed his password and he had the secondary authenticator, and they're still logging into his account.
Yeah, so to be perfectly clear, he changed the password, then he got the authenticator, then he changed it again.
Okay.
So just to get a good timetable here.
Okay. I also use that authenticator.
Now, when I noticed his posts, I immediately jumped to the, well, he must have been hacked conclusion.
It did seem kind of strange, yeah.
Yeah, I started trying to make some noise about that, was dutifully ignored by some of the hardcore higher-up tech people. And finally, a few members of the Jupiter Broadcasting community did some digging with me. We found out it's very unlikely he was hacked. Google has partnerships with these types of companies. So
this partnership allows that company to connect in and analyze his inbox. Now
that's what it looks like. Now you're not going to find a WikiLeaks style contract with Larry Page's signature on it.
I always knew Google would be doing that. I always pictured like these anonymous APIs that Python scripts use to connect to my inbox and parse through all of the non-personal information. But what you're actually saying here is another company actually established some sort of SSH connection? Did it actually say SSH?
I believe it did, yes. We could...
Not SSL?
I believe it may have been SSH.
Okay. Wow.
What was certain is that when you checked out the IP, it routed right back to this company.
Right, yeah. You could see it in the screenshot. You could just do a lookup on it.
Yeah. So how they connected is probably immaterial,
Yeah, you're right.
and I could be misspeaking.
It doesn't really matter. What really matters more is the fact that another third party was it connected to his account.
Now, Chris, I just want to be super clear. I'm not suggesting this company did anything illicit, nor that Google did. Um, Frankly, if you agree to any of these terms of service, you've agreed to it,
Mm-hmm.
which a member of the community actually pointed out to me after I had this guy's been hacked, something's wrong. So it's just something to look into, right? You know, not for nothing, the user in particular claims he wasn't pirating anything.
Yeah, it's interesting that they were like an identity and intellectual property protection firm,
Right.
which almost makes you, yeah, what are they looking for?
They're looking for piracy. If you do some research on this company, they pretty much say that on their website. They talk about protecting revenue lost due to piracy.
Do you remember the company's name?
I believe it was Mark Monitor.
Mark Monitor. Wow.
And again, this is all conjecture. This is all based on IP routing. So
yeah, so it's called protecting brands in the digital world.
Right. Now there's a third possibility here that a friend of mine on Google Plus saw the conversation, pointed out. It is possible but unlikely that this person was hacked and it was made to look like this company. The reason I say it's unlikely is because he got the damn authenticator and he changed his password about 3 times.
Yeah.
So it's just food for thought. I'd be careful. Not that anybody in the community is doing anything illicit or pirating anything.
Well, that's what really bothers me is if what if a buddy emailed me and said, "Hey man, I don't have HBO. Could you get me, what's one of the fantasy show that's on HBO? God, I'm drawing a blank.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Game of Thrones. Hey man, could you get me a copy of Game? I mean, what are they looking for? I mean, what is in there that they're searching? That just it's disturbing. But I think what your important point you're trying to make is we do need to keep these things in mind with these terms. So whenever you're using these cloud-based services, either if it's Cloud9 or whatever it is, keep that in mind.
Yeah, the only thing that concerned me was that I made a big noise of it on Twitter and Google Plus, and the responses I got, other than being flatly ignored, were we're kind of like, what's your point? Of course they're doing that. And honestly, I don't like having my email scanned.
I don't mind it for the ad bot, but yeah, I don't like it. I don't like third parties going in there and doing that.
Right. Especially, and I trust Google to be somewhat secure.
Mm-hmm.
Any third party company, what if they have a database leak or some kind of security breach?
Mm-hmm.
Worse, what if they don't notify you?
Yeah, you don't know what their controls are.
Yeah, so it's just something to keep in mind. As a community, we're all using these type of tools, so it's too little, too late. But if you have sensitive data like your banking data, you may want to go to a self-hosted email solution, or at least to a host that you trust.
And it does say in the did you make this point that in the Gmail terms of service, it does say that they allow third parties to connect to the accounts? Doesn't it say something to that extent in there?
It does. A member of the community actually pointed it out to me.
Okay. So
and
just to make sure we highlighted that, is it actually, when you agree to that end user service license, it does actually state that?
It does. So none of this is illicit. I'm not claiming that either company did anything against the law. It's legal because you agreed to it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So again, read those terms of service.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So there you go. I mean, remember, that's how you're paying for it. I mean, that is how you're paying for it. And what just scares the crap out of me is if somebody could just pay Google a large sum of money and now, oh, look, we can build a profile on this guy. He's probably a pirater.
Yeah, I mean, I checked my logs. I had nothing like that.
Yeah, I did too. I checked my logs right away, and then I logged out all their sessions.
Yeah, I was a little hardcore with it.
Yeah, I was like, I have the authenticator, I have LastPass, I changed my password. Yeah. All right, well, should we move on to low-level 101?
Let's move on to low-level 101.
Tell me about it.
All right, so got a lot of feedback about low-level programming languages and that people would like to hear about them.
Okay.
Sounds great. As I mentioned before, we're going to put the basement level at C, only because assembly, binary, probably be a little boring to talk about.
And they probably make for better blog posts than actual podcasts.
Yeah, and if you're a hardcore assembly guy, feel free to put it on Google Plus and I'll reshare it for you, or Chris, I'm sure will.
There you go.
So, what is a low-level programming language? Just a very simple working definition. It's a language that's much closer to the hardware than, say, a Java that runs in a virtual machine. So instances of lower level programming languages are obviously C, C++, and arguably Objective C. And again, all those languages compile right down to the hardware rather than to any kind of virtual machine or runtime.
Hmm.
Um, so the next point, why should you care? I know a lot of you are Python developers, and I've heard from a whole lot of Java developers too. Well, you should care if you're working in a resource-constrained environment. One example is the Raspberry Pi.
Hmm.
It's a nice little board. Doesn't have the best specs in the world. It's also $30. So, uh, another, if anybody here is a hardware hacker working on Arduino, C tends to be the preferred language for working on that system again because low resources.
Hmm.
Additionally, you know, Python, Ruby, all that kind of stuff's the new hotness, but there are tons of C programs running around. And there is a whole lot of C++ in the games industry. In fact, C++ is the de facto standard in that
Right.
industry.
Right.
So it's a fallacy to think, oh, well, I have all these nice managed language, my Ruby, my JavaScript, my Python. I don't need to worry about the low level stuff. Uh, that's probably not true, especially if your app has performance issues. Tapping into some of these lower level languages may actually help you.
Hmm.
So, again, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, though. You don't need to write everything in C. It's kind of a waste of time.
How do you decide? What is it? Is it all based on? Is it really truly come down to what is the hardware capable of, and what performance demands do I have of the application? And if they are at least a minimum of X, then in order to reach that goal, I have to use low level. But if my application doesn't require X, I could use something higher level, and thus it's going to be easier. Am I following?
Yeah, to a point. I mean, if you look at programming languages and the quantity of programming jobs, most of them are in Java and C Sharp, which are pretty high level.
And would you say that's mostly because of enterprise development?
Right, because in the enterprise, and in most cases, it's more important to reduce development time and the
Hmm.
costs associated with that,
Hmm.
rather than worry about, putting more RAM in your server. It's cheaper to buy memory.
And both Java and C Sharp will move around a lot easier. So if the enterprise adopts a new application stack or a new hardware stack, they'll be able to just kind of move that over to it. So it kind of gives them a long-term investment too.
That's true of Java in almost all cases, unless you're using a custom VM.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
C Sharp is a little more messy.
Yeah.
It, so C Sharp is made by Microsoft, but it is in fact a standard language.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 100% controlled by them. They did submit it for some kind of standards body.
That's why we have things like Mono that can.
That's
run.
right.
Yeah.
You know what's a good parallel? Objective C is actually a standard language. You can run Objective C on Linux, Mac, Windows. It compiles with GCC, LLVM, both open source compilers that are cross-platform.
Okay.
But without Cocoa, it's a little hard to use Objective C. So just like if you're using C Sharp, you need something like Mono to emulate .NET.
Right.
So the language itself, but the platform.
Right. Okay. So you kind of have to rewrite that if you're going to move it.
So you're right about the issue of speed. So in general, the lower your language, the more efficient your code is. Now that assumes a perfect C developer and a perfect Java developer met. The sad fact is most people who write C and they don't do it every day, they make mistakes. So they're not perfect. So, the CLR on .NET, when it compiles down the C Sharp into the intermediate language and then down to machine, will in fact be more efficient than your C. Same thing on Java. So, and this is this is kind of a big flame war. The Java community has, in a lot of cases, been able to use just-in-time compilers to actually be more efficient than C++.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a
I've heard from that crowd when I've let it slip that Java's too slow a few times on the air, and I always hear from, and I'm always corrected.
Yeah, but it's again, a lot of it's up to the developer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll say a bad C developer and a bad Java developer, you're probably better off in Java. Only because the system, the VM, the platform will do a lot of optimizations for you. The one area where Java still has a hard time, and this is of higher level languages in general, is with startup time. and the memory footprint required to actually start up your app tends to require more memory because they have to start up a garbage collector or something like that.
Okay.
And this is very general. I'm not just picking on Java. This goes for Ruby. In fact, Ruby is one of the slowest things you could be using.
Oh my gosh, are you saying something negative about Ruby?
I am. It's. I read actually I read a paper a few months ago that Java was 7 times faster than Ruby.
Oh,
Most
do
cases.
you believe that? Does that sound right to you?
It's probably correct.
Interesting.
It is what it is. I mean, again, the idea behind the higher level languages is that you're optimizing for developer efficiency, not for hardware efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the first person writing a web application that simply needs to save user credentials into a database. So there's no reason to do that in C for most cases. Do it in Ruby, do it in Java.
Okay.
So another reason you may want to use C++ in particular is that it's actually pretty portable. And I do this at times in mobile development. You'll write an engine for an app in C++, and with some modifications, it can run on iOS, Android, and coming up Windows 8.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, Windows Phone 7 can't run C++,
Right.
which is odd. Also, most important platform, WebOS.
Oh wow. Geez, if you can target WebOS and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sold.
But of course, Chris, there's a catch with this.
Oh, okay. My WebOS support always does have a catch.
Well, it's more with C++ in particular.
Okay.
So Microsoft embraced C++ a long time ago.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history of C++ and Objective-C, that's one of the reasons Objective-C didn't do so well in the past. Problem is they've added a lot of custom things to it. So if you're writing your application in Visual Studio and you start using Microsoft-specific libraries, it's not going to work anywhere else.
Yeah.
You're going to need to modify it heavily.
Right.
So what is usually recommended is you stick to the standard, such as now C11 is the new standard. Reasonably cross-platform. There may be some weird implementation things on Windows, and maybe certain flavors of BSD, but I'm not sure. Someone in chat's rightly pointing out that they do call it Visual C++ in the Windows space.
Yeah.
That's true. Another issue with that, though, is that usually in my experience, when .NET developers talk about Visual C++, they actually mean C++ that takes advantage of the CLR and garbage collection rather than manual memory management, which is another thing. If you're doing low-level development, C or C++, or up till recently Objective-C, you had to manage your own memory. And again, if you make a mistake, let's say you try and free an object that's already gone, you're crashing your app. So there's a lot of danger going this slow. But the benefits are huge. I mean, the speed increase in general is fine. And now I'm trying to avoid the flame here. Because again, those just-in-time compilers are pretty good.
Yeah. So you're saying with great power comes great responsibility?
Yes. Thank you, Uncle. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yes. Now, Chris, I know there's a lot of Python fans lurking.
Yeah.
So did you know that you can actually write C extensions or Python extensions in C?
Okay, this is cool. So is this sort of like Python could call out to C code and do something super efficient there and then come back?
That's the idea.
Neat.
Additionally, Python can apparently call out to Fortran.
Okay.
I have not. I found out about that in the research. Okay.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, I guess if you're in the insurance industry, that makes a lot of sense.
That's funny because Brian made a Fortran joke on the Linux Action Shows. Fortran, I think, is actually is still in the mind pretty well because people keep talking about it.
Well, Fortran's big in academics and insurance, oddly enough. I have to mention, Ruby can do the same thing. You can call out to C. So I think the question, Chris, becomes, you've got your shiny new application spec. You're ready to go. Do you go low level or high level?
That would be, at least if I didn't have a full understanding of which would be the advantages, that's probably where I'd start. That'd be my first question.
This is a little opinionated. I tend to think it's better to start as high as possible if you think it's reasonable.
Oh, okay.
So if you're targeting Arduino, fine, start with C. But if you're writing, great example, if you're writing an Android app, unless it's a game, you don't need to use a native development kit. For most cases, you
Hmm.
can use Java.
Hmm.
If you're writing a server app, Python will do fine. I know no one here is going to use Ruby, so I won't mention it. Again, if you need to optimize, you can use C. Uh, Someone in the chat's mentioning that Fortran is faster than C. Okay. Again, it may just be a little impractical in most cases, right? So the lower you go, in general, the longer the development time, which for your client or your boss, the longer the cost.
Hmm.
Now, one other thing is your tool chain. A good compiler for C++ is wonderful. The same goes for C. I'm sure everybody here has GCC installed on their system.
Oh, you
I
bet.
hope. Right. Works great, does some good optimizations. If you don't know how to do it from the command line, learn it because there's some great flags you can do to actually
Hmm.
either do more hardcore optimizations or do less optimizations.
Hmm. Gentoo Linux is a great way to play with that and experiment because they really embrace that, and so
Right.
you really can wrap your brain around what some of the capabilities are there if you just want to play with that.
Right. And there's other options. LVM is one that's big in the Apple space,
Mhm.
mainly because it's BSD licensed.
Mm.
They've gone an interesting route where they actually have a lot of help for debugging. I do use LLVM more often.
Hmm.
Honestly, use whatever you're comfortable with. If you've been using GCC forever, use GCC.
Mhm.
They're both cross-platform. They both do the job.
Mhm.
The thing you want to avoid is proprietary extensions, like I briefly touched upon.
Mhm.
And these things are very subtle. There are some cases where different platforms will treat integers differently than others in C. So again, if you're gonna go to this low level, you need to do your research. You need to know a lot about the platform you're targeting.
Wouldn't you think too the other advantage of going higher level, and I could be way wrong on this, but the other advantage of going higher level is you get to kind of ride the platform features a little better. You know, they sort of are more exposed to you at that level. They're kind of designed, and it kind of, I guess it would be more specific. But for example, if you're writing in the Microsoft Visual whatever they call it, Visual C++, whatever. I would have to imagine it's much easier to hook into a lot of the native functions that Windows 7 has, like with notification balloons or putting things in the action center and things like that, than it is if you write at a very low level. But maybe I'm wrong. Do you know?
Well, so Microsoft is kind of the exception. They embrace C++ quite a bit. I
Okay.
mean, you're correct about Windows 7. Up until recently, they kind of C# was their premier thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at some of the developer documentation for Windows RT or Windows 8, C++ is back in a big way over there. In fact, I would say C++ is probably the preferred platform.
Okay.
So you again, and they're a weird case, right? Because they're also supporting JavaScript as a main development tool for desktop apps. So they're kind of trying to, cast as wide a net as possible and see what they get. If you're already a C# developer, I don't think you have to worry. I mean, Chris, I guess what I'm saying is the best case to optimize for low-level languages would be when performance is a serious issue.
And I think a lot of implementations we see today, people break it up. Like, right? They go like back end that has to really crunch numbers and be really fast. That's low level. Front end, something that's, much easier for them to develop on, something that lets them pull in like a lot of more multimedia features on the mobile devices and things like that. That seems to be what I've seen as of late. And it's kind of the route you're taking with some stuff you're working on, isn't it?
Well, that's what I do. I mean, I'm not the normal case, I'd say.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because what I do is I write, for lack of a better term, the engine of an app in C++ if it needs to be cross-platform. And then the interface and the middle tier layers in either Objective-C, Java, or C#. That is common, especially for things like natural language processing. I forgot the name of it, but there's a big Mac app that does that. That's supposedly coming to Windows, and the reason he said he could do it because he wrote his whole engine in C++ rather than Objective-C.
Mm.
So yeah, you're correct. That's definitely a common thing. That's definitely a common thing in the Rails community as well. Because any kind of speed you can bleed out, you probably will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing of note is Node.js actually allows that too. So if you're not familiar with Node.js, is a JavaScript web server platform,
Mm-hmm.
and they have similar to Ruby gems. I think they call them, we'll call them extensions. They have a specific name, but through the Node package manager, you can import these gems or these extensions, and there's either the JavaScript version or the quote native version. Um, on the average, it seems like the native versions are a little faster, but I don't have any benchmarks to prove that.
Just observation.
Yeah, so the one I'm using is actually a connector to a database, and the native one seems a little faster.
Okay. Sounds like it's pretty subjective. Like, it really does sound like it just depends on the job.
It does depend on a job. And someone in the chat corrected me, I misspoke. Node.js is not a replacement for Apache. It's a replacement for, say, Rails. So it's a web application platform. Right, so it's for your backend to your application.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Perfect. And again, they're called modules, not extensions. Thank you.
Modules.
Sweet. All right. It's good to have real-time errata here, Chris.
Yeah, I like that. That is a great thing about it was funny, Michael. I was watching one of I found a very old live video that we did that was only recorded on Ustream, not available for download, not on any file system. And I was just being blown away at the time by how great it was to have real-time feedback from the chat room, because I had done all my shows off air up until that point. And so I was completely tripped out by it. And it's awesome because in Coda Radio, and we never mentioned this really during the show, if you watch live on Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv, or you can get audio streams over at jblive.info, you can star in our IRC chat room, because that's what we have up in the video version while we're chatting if we don't have anything to display. And lots of great commentary goes along that matches what Michael's talking about during the show in there. And you can get your voice heard too if you just join us live.
Yeah, and as you've probably noticed from the last 5 episodes, I misspeak a lot. So if you're eager to correct me, that's the way to do it.
That's the instant way to do it, at least.
Yes. Get instant gratification.
Email does it a little bit slower.
Email's a little slow, but yeah. So, I know we blew through this episode pretty quickly, and a lot of it's because I didn't want it to be boring, so I took a very high-level overview. But this is a little aside for our student developers, which, Chris, seem to be a huge proportion of the community.
I think it's awesome.
You're probably learning Java in school. I base this on the fact that you've all emailed me saying you're learning Java. So don't think that because C++ or C might be more efficient in some cases, or a lot of cases, that you need to, burn your Java books and, bust out code blocks and start doing C. You're fine at using the higher level language. In fact, it's probably the right way to go most of the time. And more experienced developers will probably agree with that.
Okay. I thought maybe you'd say, no, you got to learn low. Got to learn the basics. Got to start.
Well, there's one exception. If you're writing a Mac or a iOS app, use Objective-C and never use the new keyword, please. This is not Java. It's alloc in it. It's C, right? Objective-C is a superset on C. It's not Java Lite. Please.
Just please.
Don't do it.
Just please.
Just stop. I mean, it compiles and it does create a weak reference correctly, but it's annoying. And it looks awful. And every time I see it, tears fall down my face. Actually, that is a good point, though. If you're working on a platform that's foreign to you, try and learn the conventions of the developers that work on that platform. It's really annoying. When you see
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I have to imagine that as platforms sort of start out, there's a huge rush of people that have just really no respect for the conventions.
Yeah, and also as platforms become big.
Yeah, that's what I really meant, yeah.
So this is, again, not to harp on the Objective-C thing, though. For years, Objective-C was used by 3 guys in a basement. So the conventions were pretty firm. Now, more and more, I see very odd things that you can tell they're definitely borrowed from Java, but they don't really fit. There's little things, and every platform has this. I'm sure the Python fans, if I ever tried to write Python, would yell at me for writing Ruby or Python that looked like Ruby. It's just, and we did actually have someone write in about this a few weeks ago, Chris, about developer etiquette. It's good etiquette to use the conventions of the platform you're working with, even if they're foreign to you. Also, it helps you learn a new way of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, that'd be a good opportunity to say if you are switching to a new platform, you need to learn the ropes. You need to figure out how to do things in this new world. Codeschool.com. We have an affiliate link over at JupiterBroadcasting.com at the bottom of our website. Scroll all the way down there, and if you want to check out Code School, they have some free classes you can take for just absolutely nothing. Or if you sign up, they've got some really, really great stuff that looks like it's super well produced. They have a badge system and a karma system and a comment system and a review system, sort of like Amazon style, where you can go down there and see what other people reviewed these lessons. And it's a good way to get us up to speed on these things. And you support the show if you sign up for a membership. You do have to use that link at the bottom of JupiterBroadcasting.com, though. I thought that was a good moment you brought it up.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. And it's such a great tie-in affiliate with this show that I just love to mention it when we can. All right, so where does that leave us?
Well, that leaves us, I think we've covered this enough. I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Okay.
I apologize to the people who would have liked to see some actual C examples. I really think that's too boring, especially given the makeup of our audience, which is largely Java and apparently Python developers.
You never know. Now you're going to hear from C people.
I would love to hear, actually, because that's the only way I know what to cover.
Right.
So the only reason I'm covering this is because a few people emailed in and someone mentioned in the IRC about it.
Maybe down the road, as the show kind of grows, we could always build a subreddit and people could vote on topics. I don't know. There's always something we can do, but getting people's feedback and letting us know is really the best direct way.
Yeah, that is the best way, because other than that, I'm just going to keep talking about the Nexus queue.
I don't think so.
And Chris is going to...
We'll just make ourselves cry after a while if we keep talking about that.
Yes. All right. Should we bring everybody down? Chris, did you read this yet?
No, I haven't. Are you ready for the...
Unable to comply. Internal scanner relays have been damaged.
Computer, what happened?
The Coder Radio horror story of the week?
I am. This one's rough, and I think everyone's been in a situation like this.
All right. So Tubsta from the IRC chat room writes in, and he says, I was involved in a B2B project in Asia in the early 2000s. Basically a team of people with key specialties, aka gurus for hire. Ooh, like mercenaries only for programming. Were gathered to move forward on a sagging project. I was designated sysop code deployer. Okay, so that'd kind of be what I was doing if I was one of these elite guys traveling to Asia. So I like this. I'm with him so far.
Would you be the face or like B.A. Baracus in this?
I think I would be like Tom Cruise from Mission Impossible, where I would get to the data center and then I would drop down from a rope and then I would be suspended there and I'd be trying to get root access.
Fantastic.
Yeah. He says, as a code deployer, I spend a lot of time on the UK-US time zone, so it's 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Local usually, as it fits main development team in the US, so we could replace the time it takes to move code into production. So, that way he has to, even though he's over there, he kind of has to work with the team back at home on their schedule. So he ends up working these late hours. When I first arrived, I really didn't have any idea of how the environment was set up. Documentation was lacking, though there was a couple of Visio diagrams that sort of helped. Boy, I know that one. It was constantly bugging me that I'd get code, roll it into production, and the first test, and out comes debug statements. I continually fired back emails asking if anyone actually tested the code before shipping it to me, and usually the response was, yes, we did. At this point, I know, right? At this point, we started using DR to test. I'm assuming using DR, is that a tool that you're familiar with, or is that like disaster recovery?
I'm pretty sure he means disaster recovery, yeah.
Okay. As to not screw around with the production too much, I was finding that I was having similar issues. They were originally thought maybe the dev environment. We thought maybe it was the dev environment. Like dev environments are hacked and played with by developers, and I know that one too. Developers can mess things around in there sometimes. You guys are such. And he goes on to say, and even though it should sort of resemble the environment they are coding for, it was anything but. It was far from it. So we continue to deploy in DR and use it as a pseudo production environment. Oh, okay, I get to what he's saying. So instead of using their test environment, they're now using their disaster recovery environment.
No, he's saying the opposite. Instead of using production, they're using disaster recovery as production.
Right. So which means if they need to recover if something goes out,
there's nowhere to go.
Yeah. So he said we would get 3 or 4 shipments of code a night, and I would try to deploy it into this disaster recovery environment based on feedback I would get from them upon UAT testing once completed, user acceptance testing. Not my ideal way of debugging. This would go on for probably a week, at which point we would make a call to refresh the production with a new code base. Wow. Something you think should be fine turns out to be a nightmare. Think of ramming a square peg into a round hole. It isn't going to work. Well, that's when I discovered the production is not the same as DR, and the code once again broke, and we were back to square one. We did end up fixing the code base on the fly, however. If we really blew the ITIL process that we were using to manage and streamline and keep a stable production state. So basically, we had three systems. We had three systems that would have been all the same, and we all assumed were the same. However, in this case, three were totally different, causing nothing but problems and probably a lot of wasted time and energy. One could only wonder how smoothly prod would have been after we'd failed over for disaster recovery. Oh my gosh, he's lucky they found it before they had to do that. Moral of the story, if you don't build the systems, assume they weren't built correctly.
So there's a lot wrong there.
Yikes, yeah. I mean, just some bad system admin practices from the previous guy he replaced, it sounds like, too, just to begin with.
Possibly. It also means the system admin should probably have not allowed the devs to touch things, because we can kind of be a little hacky. It actually kind of ties into Emmett's feedback, though, if you think about it. A simple solution. I'm assuming each environment's its own server here. One image, 3 servers. Done.
Yeah.
They're identical.
Yep. Yeah,
Although,
and with tools like virtualization, that's even easier because you can build one server and then clone it.
You could use Scale Engine, have 3 BSD jails, and be ready to go.
There you go.
But honestly, he mentioned using Visio. This was messed up from the jump, it sounds like.
Yeah, so it sounds like from the beginning, so at least if I was evaluating from a system admin standpoint, the lack of documentation meant that the new guy coming in couldn't be properly handed over the project, which means that he started at a disadvantage. And then the other thing is it sounds like there wasn't proper change management on the production environment, so developers were able to make changes either way, or the system guy made some changes on the production environment, so it didn't match the disaster recovery environment. And so when they just made the assumption, and there was a little bit of a mistake there because some assumption was made that disaster recovery matched production. And you would think that would be the case because in order for disaster recovery to work, it needs to match production, but it didn't. And so if you tested and confirmed and got user acceptance testing on the disaster environment and then moved to production, with those assumptions in place, it broke. And there's a lot going there. It sounds like a lot of cooks in the kitchen too.
Yeah, I mean, you could nitpick a lot of things here, I think. One thing is, he says user acceptance testing. Is that people are just manually running through it and testing it like that?
Yeah, probably.
Because this seems a prime example of where automated testing of any sort, I'm not saying go hardcore test-driven development, but anything would have been pretty helpful. Additionally, see, I guess it wouldn't be, though, because how is he going to work around, even with automated tests, they'd succeed on his testing environment, but still fail on production.
I can't tell you how many times I've had clients who their version of user acceptance testing is they go into the application or the web page and they click on a bunch of stuff as fast as they can. They hit refresh a ton of times. They move around the UI and they say, okay, it looks good. And I'll sign off on this. And I just... it just drives me nuts because that they're not going to find the issues, and it just means more work down the road.
Not even that. If the environments are different, Tupsta had no chance. I mean, he was writing his code to what's presumably a separate server for testing or for dev. It's running fine. He puts it into QA. QA tests it there. It's fine. It goes into production and fails.
I know exactly how this happens, too, because he's working on the server, maybe the previous guy, and something isn't working. And so the developer says, well, I've checked everything here on my machine. Everything looks fine. Maybe we need to change something over there. So they start changing things on the server to try to make whatever they're doing try to work. And then at some point, they either figure out something in the code or it was something on the server, and they've moved it to this new configuration, and now it doesn't match the other systems. And that just happens. That can happen slowly over time, even. It's just kind of a creep thing that happens.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it seems like there's a breakdown between the relationship between the developers and the sysadmins. Honestly, I know sysadmins hate us, and they probably should. We like to ruin your systems. But there needs to be some kind of cooperation. I won't RM TACR root on our nice Ubuntu server, and you'll make sure each environment's identical.
Again, I think some of these are past problems. Unless you need to test, scale, and load at the same level of production, virtualization with cloning and snapshotting, it really helps with a lot of this.
Well, they don't need to be should clarify. They don't need to be identical in terms of hardware, but in terms of software.
I don't know, though. I mean, even with hardware level, it's nice to know you have the same driver, same controller driver, same NIC driver, all that stuff. It's nice to know that, the operating system is interacting at the same level. And again, virtualization provides that vanilla across the board, completely the same configuration.
True. One thing I would have liked to hear is how he eventually resolved it, other than unless they are using disaster recovery as production.
He must have had to redo the boxes, right?
I don't know. I mean,
I would think.
I would imagine the solution, at least my solution, would have been an email to the lead sysadmin saying you need to repave all these boxes.
Yeah.
But perhaps it wasn't in the budget. Perhaps the sysadmins were gone. Because it sounds like, unless I'm misunderstanding, that they ended up just putting disaster recovery in production. or did you not get that impression?
That's what I got, but I'm hoping that was just a temporary fix until they repaved.
Yeah, because that's.
And then then they have to go back and turn production into disaster recovery.
Yeah, and it's just going to be two Frankenstein servers. That's so bad.
They probably run CentOS. Oh.
It's probably a Linux server that they put a desktop environment on, and I know exactly which desktop environment they put on it.
GNOME 2, maybe? GNOME 1?
No, GNOME would never allow this kind of problem. GNOME is
CDE?
Awesome.
What?
I think it must have been KDE.
I just hope it wasn't Unity. Not on a server.
Unity, they need some more RAM.
Of course it's KDE. You and your KDE.
I don't really mind KDE. I do mind non-stable development environments, though. So that's a problem.
I love I'm already getting them. What CentOS? Yeah, I got somebody. I hooked somebody.
Please send all your CentOS hate mail to chris@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Send all your KDE hate mail to Michael at... Oh, never mind.
What we really want is people's horror stories. Send those to coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com or use the contact us link. We want to get some of these horror stories in here because these are a lot of fun and it gives us something to chew on.
Yeah, and if your horror story starts out with Vizio, don't question it. You know it's going to be good.
Yeah.
There's no reason to even think, oh, well, is this... No, if Vizio was involved.
What I ought to do, if I had like a signing bonus, for every time I had a client where the only documentation they give me is a 2-year-old Visio diagram that sometimes even has like hand-drawn like corrections on it, I wish I could get like a $2,000 signing bonus every time I did that. Because I would only need like a few clients, I'd be set.
That's fantastic. You're lucky. You're lucky you get that, though. I usually get a very vague Google Docs, just word process.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying I always get that. It's either that or nothing.
I mean, I'm trashing Vizio here. I would kill to get Vizio documentation, actually.
Sometimes it is handy. Boy, if it's ever up to date, that's always the issue.
Even if it's a little old.
I see a header in here for the Jupiter Broadcasting mobile app project update.
Yes, so there's been progress. Unfortunately, I was busy this week, so I think I caused a little bit of a stall, but that's okay.
Happens.
So basically, we're trying to finalize a feature set.
Oh, cool.
Lot of issues.
What's on the list so far?
So that are definitely on the list is the normal stuff. The ability to download the audio streams, play the audio streams.
The live ones?
Playing live audio is on the list. Playing live video is a little more touchy.
I think it should be like doable on iPhone because we have an HLS one that like just plays in Safari right now. Just like, you just go to it in Safari and it just plays. So that seems like that should be pretty easy. But
it should be doable, yeah. We're just so my thought is to keep scope as lean as possible to start.
No, yeah. Well, and it's not really isn't totally needed in the browser since it in the app since it works in the browser. So like the back catalog, MP3 files and stuff.
That kind of thing. One thing that's being discussed is some kind of IRC interaction.
Oh, that'd be cool. You know what else would be really cool is the calendar.
The calendar probably was mentioned. I think we are doing that.
Okay, cool.
The IRC issue is actually an interface issue, though. How would we make that look and feel, like a good experience rather than...
There is, have you seen that IRC client that it's all HTML based, not Mibit, but it's the one where you install a little server-side agent and it runs, and then it has a little HTML front end. I could send you a few examples, but it works on mobile.
Yeah, send me some examples. Additionally, I actually got a couple YouTube videos from designers in the community.
Ooh, cool.
So there are a few, starting out user interface sketches, some suggestions, some discussion. And again, we're probably going to start actually coding, if not this week, then next weekend. If you want to be part of the discussion, because now's the time. If you wanted to push something, you'd get a very good reaction rather than later.
I would love to see the audio stream since we're making that big radio push. Because that's just an M3U stream, so it's pretty easy.
Yeah,
had to be so exciting to have that. Oh, so what's a good way for people to get involved?
Well, just go to GitHub. My username is Dominic M, and it's a public repo right there. We're discussing everything publicly in GitHub issues.
Cool.
So there's no secret cabal behind the scenes. Just jump right in. You have to have a GitHub account, but it's free.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.
That's it.
Well, I can't wait to follow that on the show. I think that's going to be a really cool thing to. Plus, then once we're done, I mean, it's not just the people who follow this show that get something, but then, everybody that follows the network gets something. So, and they'll all know it came from the Coder Radio audience. How cool is that?
Because Coder Radio is awesome.
Yeah. All right. So now, I saw we have a book pick in here, don't we?
We have one of my favorite books.
Oh, really?
Yep. It's called Coder to Developer. It's written by a man named Mike Gunderloy. So his name's Mike, so he knows what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. But all kidding aside, in general, this is a book about working as a software developer at any level.
Okay.
So it's geared towards newer developers, but also in the later chapters, it talks about a lot of advanced things, such as dealing with management.
Oh.
Or clients who maybe should be in an asylum.
Oh, that's a good one.
There are a few, and there's a good deal of technical discussion, but he keeps it very high level to avoid any specific platform or language.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Boy, so, the stuff in there about client stuff, if you are doing your own little independent stuff, sometimes if there's ever a way to fast forward and get some life lessons on that so you can do that right, because sometimes there's mistakes that you make that you can't fix with that relationship, and it's nice to kind of have a few.
And even simple miscommunications can cause undue tension for no reason. I mean,
or just not really knowing what you need to make clear up front. It's more complicated than you'd think it can be sometimes. So a book that kind of helps get your head around that's probably not a bad idea. And of course, we'll have a link to that in the show notes. If you grab that, you do support the show. It'll be an affiliated link.
In fact, I would recommend this book for anybody who perhaps listened to last episode and chafed at the businessy side of it. Because you're definitely the audience for this book. Because it assumes you're a very good technical person, but you might need a little bit of help managing the project or the client or even your manager.
That is perfect for the audience.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we talk about our tool of the week?
Our tool of the week is called the Boot Smart Pointers. They are a pair of boots, much like Uggs. That no, I'm kidding. So this is a library for C++ developers. Without going into too much detail, basically it allows you to create objects and make them, quote, smart pointers that will not allow you to incorrectly copy them. So it'll be a compile error, which is good. Mm-hmm. And you could do an auto-releasing one, which once there's no more references to the pointer, we'll release it. Sorry about that. So that's, it's just something to make developing in C++ a little easier. You don't need to use it all the time. In fact, you could probably overuse it, and that would be bad. But it's one of those tools. It's open source. It's free. That when used in moderation is probably going to speed up your development time.
Very nice. That is a very serendipitous pick with the topic for this week. I like how you brought it all together.
It's almost like I'm strategically picking things.
Now, do you want to tease at all about what's coming up? I mean, I know you've already got the schedule, but you keep it kind of fluid. So I don't want to make you pin down if you don't want to, but we could tease if you want.
We can. I just forgot what I put for next week. Hang on.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. Because I kind of sprung up. So Michael has had a Google Docs spreadsheet really before the show started with all of these episodes mapped out because there's a lot. And then, of course, as we've gotten email at coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, the list has just grown. So
it's just ballooned.
Yeah. It's kind of been like a reshuffling the deck here a few times to see how things fit in. And then, of course, squeezing in Google I/O and the Worldwide Developers Conference towards the beginning of the show kind of pushed a few things out, too.
So next week is actually a perfect follow-up to this.
Okay.
So the title, because I like to be clever, is Picasso's Shadow, Abstraction in Modern Software Development.
Oh, that is a good follow-up. Oh, I like the title too.
So if you're using a high-level language, you're embracing some sort of abstraction. right? So this week was about low level. You see what I did there?
I like that. Now, where can people follow you during the week, Michael?
They can find me on Google Plus under my name, Michael Dominic. You can find me at Twitter at Dumanuco. They could also find my website at dominic.com.
And of course, you're over on GitHub, mdominic. People want to follow the project.
Dominic M.
Dominic M. Oh, okay. Dominic M. Don't get that wrong, people. Don't let me screw you up.
And hopefully next week I have an announcement. That's going to be awesome.
Oh, okay. I'll look forward to that. Of course, you can watch us live on Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific or noon Eastern. And then the show's available for download shortly after that. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Coder Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.